The reason your home recorded drums never sound right has nothing to do with your mix. It happened before you ever opened your DAW. I just tracked a real metal kit in a less than ideal basement, and I'm going to show you exactly what raw drums are supposed to sound like and the mic choices and placements that got us there. Say you've spent the weekend recording drums. You loaded everything into your DAW, started mixing, and no matter what plugin you reach for, no EQ, no compressor, no saturator, it just won't sit right. The kick sounds like a cardboard box. The snare is buried in cymbal bleed. The toms have no definition and have a horrible ring to them. And you start thinking, maybe you just need better plugins, or maybe you need a better mixing engineer. You don't. I've mixed hundreds of metal songs, and I can tell you with total certainty, if the raw tracks aren't right, no mix on earth is going to save them. The work happens before you ever record a single hit. So this past weekend, I went out to record drums for a band called Cytokine. They're tracking a single, and the conditions were exactly what most of you were working with. A basement, untreated, not a purpose-built tracking room. The drummer did his part though. He reskinned the entire kit and tuned it properly, which already puts him ahead of about 90% of the home recorded drum tracks I get sent for mixing. What I'm about to show you is the exact mic selection, placement, and bleed management strategy we use to get a pro-sounding raw drum recording in a room that absolutely shouldn't have allowed it. And at the end, I'll open up Reaper and we'll listen to the raw tracks together so you can hear exactly what you should be striving for. Before we touch a single mic, here's what I want you to understand. There are 3 things that determine whether your raw drums are going to translate to a great mix. First, mic selection. The right mic on the right drum captures the right frequencies before you ever need to EQ. Second is mic placement. Even the best mic in the world sounds like trash if you put it in the wrong spot. And third is bleed management, because every mic on the drum kit is also picking up every other drum, and if you don't control that, you lose all your mixing flexibility downstream. Get those 3 things right, and your raw tracks will already sound 80% of the way to mixed. Let me show you exactly what we did on every piece of the kit. Let's start with the kick, because the kick is where most home recordings completely fall apart. We use 2 mics, a kick in and kick out. For the kick in, we use the SE Electronics BL8. That's a boundary mic, and that's important. It sits halfway inside the kick, resting on a small pillow. And because it's a boundary mic, it captures attack and beater click without picking up a ton of low-end bloom. So what's this doing? It's giving us the click, the percussive snap that cuts through a wall of distorted guitars. Without that click, your kick disappears in the mix. For the kick out, we use the SE Electronics V-Kick, about 1 inch off the kick skin. That's our body mic. That's where the thump lives, the low-end weight that gives the kick its power. And now for a bit of a secret weapon, we drape thick blankets over the entire kick. And I know what you're thinking, that's overkill. You can't even see the mics anymore. But this is how we control bleed. The blankets isolate the kick mics from the snare, toms, the cymbals, everything. So when we solo the kick later, you're hearing the kick, not a muddy soup of everything else in the room. And now onto the snare. The snare is the heartbeat of metal. If it doesn't sound right, the whole song doesn't sound right. On top, we use the SE Electronics V7X, positioned 1 to 2 inches over the rim, pointing in toward the center of the snare to capture more attack. And here's something that's absolutely critical for bleed management. The null point of the mic was facing toward the hi-hat. Every dynamic mic has a null point, a direction where it picks up almost nothing. And if you aim that null at the worst bleed source, you've just eliminated half your hi-hat problem before you even record a hit. On the bottom of the snare, we ran a Shure SM57 about 3 to 4 inches under the snare, pointing right at the wires. That gives us the snap, the sizzle, the snariness that the top mic can't capture on its own. When you blend those two in the mix, that's where the snare goes from fine to massive. We applied the same principle on the toms. We use the SE Electronics V-Beats on every tom, about 1 to 2 inches over the rim, pointing halfway between the center and the rim. That position gives you the perfect balance of attack and tone. If you point it too close to the center, you get all click and no body. You point it too close to the rim, and you get all body, no definition. Right in between is where a pro tom sound lives. And just like the snare, the null point is facing the closest cymbal. So for the floor toms, the null is aimed at the ride. The rack toms, the null is aimed at the crash. You stack those small decisions across the entire kit, and your bleed problem essentially solves itself. Now, overheads are probably the most disrespected piece of a drum recording. People think they're just for cymbals. They're not. Overheads are how you can glue the whole kit together. They're your stereo image. We used a matched pair of Rode NT5s in a space pair measured exactly 4 feet from the center of the snare. That equal distance is critical because it keeps the snare locked dead center in the stereo image. Each mic was aimed at the cymbals on its side for the most even representation. For the hi-hat, we used an SM7B about 12 inches above the outside of the hat. Stack cymbal got an SE8 8 inches above, and the ride got an SE8 6 inches underneath, pointing at the bell. Every spot mic exists to give you control in the mix. They're not the main sound, they're just surgical tools. And now for the secret weapon, the room mics. This is what separates a recording that sounds like it was tracked in a basement from one that sounds like it was tracked in a real studio. The stereo room is a matched pair of Shure KSM 141s in an XY configuration, about 10 to 12 feet in front of the kit, chest height, pointed at the snare. That gives us a believable stereo room sound we can blend in for size. But the mono room is the move I want you to remember. We took an MXL 990, and before we set it up, we walked around the room while the drummer just played the snare. We literally moved around until we found the spot where the impact hit us hardest in the chest. That spot. That's where the room is the most alive. We put the mic there, pointed it away from the kit, toward the closest wall, and that captures the room reflections in a way that adds massive weight to the recording. That's a technique you could use in any room, even a bad one, especially a bad one. Real quick, before we open up the DAW, if you want the full breakdown of how to mic your own kit step by step, I have a free drum recording guide linked below. It covers every mic position we just walked through. Grab it. It's free. All right, let me show you what good raw drums actually sound like. We're going to listen to each track soloed, completely raw, no EQ, no compression, no plugins of any kind. Pay attention to the three things on every track: the attack, the tone, and how little bleed is on the spot mics. So the kick in, let's check that out. So you could really hear that click. That's the BL8. There's no EQ, that's just the mic capturing what it's supposed to capture. And you could hear, other than the snare, there's really not much bleed on this kick in. You don't really hear any cymbals. Now let's check the kick out. That's the body of the kick. It's round, it's weighty, it's focused. And again, because we used that blanket, you really don't hear much bleed on these mics at all. Let's put them both together to hear how the two mics sound together. Really, really nice. Now let's check out the snare top mic. Not much bleed on that. And let's find a section that has the hi-hat on it. And you can hear how that hi-hat's really barely there. That's that null point trick that's paying off for us right there. And let's check out the bottom snare. That's all sizzle, pure wires. Love it. And the two together. Very nice snare sound. On to the three tom tracks. I mean, you could just see there's nice transients to them where each of them hit. It's sharp and defined. It's not soft and blurry. And you could clearly see where each hit is in relation to the bleed. That's from all that time we put into getting those null points to be focused on the cymbals. Let's hear how just the tom tracks sound. Okay, now for the overheads. So you can tell the snare's dead center, the cymbals are balanced left and right, and that's how you know your overheads are set up correctly. We can skip the close mic cymbals for now because, like I said, those are only used sparingly, if at all. So we don't have to pay too much attention to those. We'll focus now on the stereo room mic. So that's where we're going to get a lot of our size. And now let's check out that mono room mic. That is going to be where the weight is. This is what we found by walking around with the snare playing. But here's the real magic. If I throw on some heavy compression on this mic, listen to just how gnarly this sounds. That right there, that's the Mojo mic. Now let's check out all tracks together, no processing. Here's how it all sounds completely raw, no plugins, and this is what your raw drums should sound like before you ever open a plugin. So 3 things determine whether your raw drums are going to translate. Mic selection, you pick the right mic for the source. Mic placement, get it where it captures the attack and tone with minimal bleed. And bleed management, null points, blankets, distance. Get those 3 things right, and your raw tracks will already be 80% of the way to mixed. Stop fighting with mud and bleed at the mix stage. Fix it at the source. I promise you, you will hear a massive improvement. If this video helped you out, please hit that like button and subscribe for more metal production content. Grab the free drum recording guide in the description. It's a full breakdown of everything we covered. And if you're working on a song and you want a professional pair of ears on your tracks, I do full mixing for metal bands. That's also linked below. And if you want to see what happens after the recording is done, how I take raw metal drums like these and mix them from scratch, watch my video how I mix these metal drums from scratch right here. I break down every single step: EQ, compression, bus processing, the whole thing. It's the natural next step once you get your recordings dialed in. Now go track some real drums.